Once again, thank you very much for joining, and I'm going to hand it over to the ANF team. Chris, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and your team?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. We're going to take you through.
Sorry, you have to do the introduction one more time. Accidentally, I muted you.
Well, good morning, and let's start that all over. If that works. Chris Cochran, I'm the Azure Director for Azure NetApp Files. With me is Win Ballkamp. Win is our Azure Architect. And also in the room with us is Ken Seddon, another NetApp Architecture working with us on Azure NetApp Files, and Chuck Kelly. So as we dive in today, we'll spend a few minutes on Azure NetApp Files and then also provide you some of the growth and then also a roadmap of features that are there that we can show, and then also data centers that are on the roadmap. So we'll dive into it just from a coverage perspective. This is always good just to kind of see the coverage across the Americas that we've broken out. I own the South Central OU aligned with Microsoft, and my partner is Win Ballkamp. We have other folks that share responsibilities in the Northeast, Southeast, North Central. We just divided out into Great Lakes as well. And then I have peers in the Northwest and the Southwest. As we introduce Azure NetApp Files, some of the conversations are very, very helpful for us to kind of level set with the customers and talk with them about what Azure NetApp Files is. Obviously, it's powered by NetApp, but it truly is an Azure first-party service, oftentimes referred to or referenced back as a similar product as Databricks. It is an enterprise-grade product, if you will, for storage in the cloud for Azure NetApp Files, and it provides the customer base an option of 3 tiers. And the importance of 3 tiers is that they can select those tiers as options for standard, premium, and ultra tiers. And we've got reference cases that we can share of testing across these platforms that have just been incredibly outstanding performance, and I want to iterate the lowest latencies in the industry. So the reason I specify that is because that's oftentimes a talking point that most customers will begin to ask. Just to share with you, one of our Madrid oil and gas customers did some initial testing, and interestingly enough, the performance was 3.5 to 5 times better in Azure NetApp Files than on-prem workloads. So those performances were shared across that. Their latencies were sub-milliseconds. So outstanding results. We do like to obviously reiterate that this is a build service by Microsoft. It's metered, it's managed, all supported. What that means is if for example, a customer does experience any technical related issues, they do open a Microsoft support ticket. Okay, and it's accessed through Azure, portal.azure.com. We went GA back on the 28th of April, and working with Tad Brockway, I had an opportunity to meet with him, and he had some really lofty expectations, better than expected, and he sees the growth of exabytes on ANF, and truly we're trending in that direction. We're beginning to feel the curve of a hockey stick as it's moving up and to the right. And I'll share with you at the very ending and closing just some of the logos and the capacities that we've grown to in a short duration. More importantly, though, we've also taken into consideration looking at Azure NetApp Files and building out the reference architectures. The importance of this is we've covered about 6 of 11 sectors. Those are oil and gas, number one, very near and dear into this Houston, Texas market segment. And that I think is kind of taken on a life of its own. We've gotten manufacturing, healthcare, life sciences, financial services, and media and entertainment. We'll continue to expand these out over a duration of time, and we can talk a little bit further about those. But just to share with you a little example, in oil and gas, the availability that the cloud, and specifically Azure to Azure NetApp Files with the performances and latencies that we provide them, construct and build out an infrastructure just for reservoir simulation right now alone has begun to provide them the availability to stand up instances and environments that they traditionally took weeks and months to do. They're doing in hours. And this is truly important to them because they can flex it up and flex it down as needed and required, right? And eventually they'll have tiering capabilities to move and adjust the data inside of the 3 tiers that I mentioned. But we built this reference architecture with the HPC team here with Microsoft, and we've covered a gambit of the specific application providers such as Schlumberger and Halliburton Landmark. We've got CGG under test, RockDock, and a few others. And this is beginning to really inspire the large oil and gas sector customers to now move and migrate into Azure NetApp Files just from the experience. And as we continue to broaden this out across multiple sectors, we'll be bringing that to market as well. But just to give you examples, we've gotten the CPU as expected with VMs that'll be utilized across the SMB and also across the Linux file systems as well. So more to come here. I know I'm going fast. There's some information. We can share most of this information out and provide you some updates as this begins to grow across sectors.
And Chris, just to clarify, you're going to be sharing some of those slides. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
And I will upload it, with the presentation.
Good. I'd like to turn this over to Win. He's gotten some specific workloads that we can dive into a little bit, and then I'll come back and wrap this up. I'll transition.
Cool. So thank you. This is some of the workloads that have been that ANF is targeted towards. Really, the kind of the main point here is that it's NFS as a service or SMB as a service. Coming a little later on, you'll be able to access the same data set over both protocols simultaneously. So this is very important to the oil companies, for example, where they have a lot of Linux applications, Windows applications, accessing the same data files, and it saves them a lot of space, time, and development and operations. So that'll be coming beginning of next year. But really, the main thing is that people love is this is a POSIX compliant enterprise level file system served at sub-millisecond latencies. The implications of it being POSIX compliant is huge, especially as customers are at the beginning stages of their cloud migrations, moving their applications into the cloud. They don't have to do a whole lot of effort recoding and refactoring their applications to use some other storage than what they're used to today. So that really reduces development time and ease of use. And this is why developers, when they see this, and Linux admins are also very thankful, because a lot of times at the early stages, the Linux admins are spinning up VMs to serve out NFS, which gets to be really unmanageable when you start scaling. Likewise, it connects to your Active Directory infrastructure. It can connect back to your AD infrastructure on-prem with the right network. You got to have the networking done correctly, but it is possible to you can use the Azure AD, on-prem AD, everything in between, which makes it super easy to get set up on the SMB side as well. So it really minimizes the amount of change. We've seen a lot of this is why the uptake's been so fast. It just makes the use cases today that they have running on-prem much easier to get into Azure. Next. So I forgot I didn't have control of the presentation. The hierarchy is it's at this, you register the subscription ID. Right now we are whitelisting. It's kind of a throttle control because demand is, we don't want to have the demand outstrip the supply. Soon this will be done at the tenant level. So when you register the tenant level, it'll be every sub underneath it will get included. Underneath, you create a storage account. It's a NetApp account, kind of similar to how you do Blob. You set up a storage account. This establishes the root of the namespace. You can have 10 of those per subscription. And then within the account, you provision a capacity pool. It's a minimum of 4 terabytes, a maximum of 500 terabytes. And then within those capacity pools are your volumes. And the volumes are up to 100 terabytes max size each. You can have 25 pools per account, 500 volumes per pool. The capacity pool is where the performance tier is set. So Ultra, Premium, Standard. Standard is 16 megabytes per second per terabyte. Premium is 64 megabytes per second per terabyte, and Ultra is 128 megabytes per second per terabyte. That per terabyte I/O density is important. Storage is consumed not just by capacity but by I/O, and so that's a little bit of adjustment in your thinking when you architect the storage. So that means if you were at standard, which is 16 megabytes per second per terabyte, and you provisioned 500 gigabytes of capacity, you would get 8 megabytes per second. You get half that, right? If you had 1 full terabyte, you'd get 16 megabytes. Likewise, if you had 2 terabytes, you'd get 32 megabytes. So that's how it scales around. So you can see that you can very quickly, even with the lowest tier of storage, you can very quickly saturate a VM, which the max throughput there is, I think, 30 gigabits per second. The architecture, go ahead and advance the slide. That's good. This is an Azure service. It is an Azure service. So it uses the Azure resource provider. It's a resource provider. It uses the portal, the CLI, the PowerShell, the REST API to provision it to the Azure API. It does go into the Azure service delivery engine, and then it provisions a delegated subnet into your VNet. Okay, so it's using the VNet injection kind of networking. That's an important thing. So, and advance the next slide if you could, please.
And it's on a private IP address.
Yes, that's correct. It's on a private IP address, right?
Is there a minimum requirement on the subnet size? Or?
It's a /28 right now is what's recommended. That's probably going to change when cross-region replication comes in later on this year to like a /26. There's still the recommendation hasn't been released yet. Okay. They're still developing that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good question. So one question that comes up is, well, how are volumes provisioned? This usually comes from a legacy NetApp customer, but the IP address, when you provision a volume, that's at volume provisioning time is when it'll have you do the delegated subnet and the network configuration, and it'll create a VNIC for ANF. And the way the volumes are apportioned, and the VNIC kind of becomes the point of load balancing. So it does some number of volumes per IP address, and then of course Azure is load balancing these volumes across the stamps within the Azure data center, and of course that maps back to the hardware that NetApp provides, and we're developing against. Next.
So would you recommend a high throughput, like on a high throughput application that is running, some network traffic, and then you have NFS as well? So would you recommend like multiple NICs and one NIC for the ANF and another one so you get like a high, you get your 10, 20 gigabits per second?
That gets abstracted. That's all abstracted. So really, what the customer has to worry about is the volume and the performance tier. So kind of map the performance that you're looking at, and of course, each individual VM has its own maximum throughput, right? So the benefit here is that you can scale many VMs to one volume and supports massive scale at the VM layer, right? Okay. Yeah, so that gets abstracted from the customer.
Okay.
And like most Azure resources, I think this is true of all. Transitive routing is not supported, so there's a lot of hub and spoke networks. So there needs to be a peer between hub A and hub B in order for a VM in hub A to mount a volume in hub B. You can't route it through the spoke network. Otherwise, it's completely there is some work going on the back end with enhancing some network things, but those are all kind of back end features that come along with Azure engineering. Next slide.
Any questions?
I'm gonna pause there. Any questions on the phone?
Yeah, please unmute and ask the question. We still have the chat issue, so as I said, we have to recreate the meeting invite. But if you have any questions, please unmute and ask. Okay. Currently today, we can serve out SMB2 and SMB3. A little story about SMB2. It's important to note that this time last year, SMB2 was not in the service, and the oil and gas companies especially said, we don't have SMB3. Everything is SMB2. And so the engineering team, the product team, reprioritized and got SMB2 delivered into the product in 2 months. So
So they do listen to the customers, they do prioritize, and they will act when they get a demand. Regional availability as well is another one. South Central, for example, was not in the region. Well, a lot of oil companies are in Houston. South Central is their nearest data center, and so that got accelerated as well. NFS 3, NFS 4.1 is in preview now. You can do snapshots, which are rapid recovery points, either scripted, they're basically on demand through a trigger or through the portal. You can recover a snapshot to a different volume today. What's coming in the next couple of months is to be able to do a snap recovery to the same volume, override it. 3 service tiers. All the monitoring telemetry is through Azure Monitor, and customers can recover their own files through the Windows Previous Versions tab or the .snapshot directory, which makes self-service recovery very easy for that file. Next.
One of the key points I think we point out is this service is growing. It's almost like a sprint methodology versus a marathon. What you're seeing today is the features that you would traditionally have on-prem. Now they'll be, featured into Azure NetApp Files over the next coming quarters. I don't think that'll ever end. There's always going to be new features, requests that customers are going to bring forward, and we'll continue to grow this features and capabilities roadmap.
So some features coming in the next couple of months, I can tell you, is cloning ability. This has huge implications for application developers and database folks. It gets used heavily on-prem on NetApp systems today, but this allows you to develop a data pipeline, so you can have staging and QA, UAT, various environments that you use, and you can do promotions through that, and it'll be totally automated through the application development pipeline. Flex clones don't consume much space. They're based on a snapshot, so they're extremely space efficient, and they take about 250 milliseconds per flex clone to complete. And on-prem customers today, we routinely have customers creating and destroying over 10,000 clones a night for all their different educational, environmental, different needs that they need. Totally automated, hands-off, and that function is coming into ANF over the next, by December. These are the current regions that are available with what's scheduled. The yellow ones, or maybe orange on your screen, depending on your resolution, are ones that were West and North Central were closed. They were full, but here recently they've expanded those data centers, so ANF will be moving into those 2 data centers, or regions, I'm sorry, as well. And if there's a region that you see here doesn't have a date on it, it'll get there eventually, but if there's a high priority one, we can send you, you can contact us and let us know, the case, and we can get that to the customer set, to the product team, sorry.
Yeah, the pair that's right now that's available in Central is the Iowa data center. It's being brought online in advance of North Central.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, almost got the U.S. covered. U.S. government is rapidly coming online in the major data centers in Europe.
Yep. Australia is huge, Southeast Asia, and we brought in South Europe. That just happened within the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, right now their cadence is they're bringing on about a region every 6 weeks or so right now. So
more to come.
Next.
So I thought we'd pause there, see if there's any questions that we can field about Azure NetApp Files. So the importance of this slide that I'm showing today, this morning, we just walked through. I mentioned since April the 28th, in a short duration, we've onboarded over 500 customers. Today, we're setting just shy, 40 terabytes shy of 10 petabytes. So the service has been a little on that hockey stick up and to the right. Some of the most notable names are BP, Chevron, Repsol, Microsoft, LinkedIn. Those types of almost household names are the significant customers that are onboarded and using in production Azure NetApp Files. And some of the feedback that we've gotten just across the board has been, performance is outstanding, latency is the lowest in the industry. Clearly putting Azure NetApp Files well ahead of any other cloud provider in the industry. So the customer's feedback has been just absolutely phenomenal. We'll have some customers participating on the keynote stage, talking about Azure NetApp Files at Ignite in Orlando this year. So we were just participating in some preparatory calls this morning about that. So you'll even hear it at that event as well.
Yeah, we actually heard last week, this is the fastest growing service within Azure today. It's actually gone past Azure Kubernetes service.
Yeah.
And so it is a big one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's got a lot of attention.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So I just want to close off here and just give you the ANF process. As Wynn mentioned, we're continuing the whitelisting process. What that means is we'll give a white glove onboarding service to hand the customer into Azure NetApp Files. The reason we're doing that is just the control, right? We want to make sure that it's a great experience as the customers bring into it. The NetApp teams have been doing that and then handing that over to the account teams with the Microsoft teams and working kind of a hand in glove process to start. We've done very, very good at landing, and then we start working on other applications collectively in the expanding mode of this, because it's just never done, right? I mean, there's always a new application, there's always new areas. And then once somebody finds out how quickly they're onboarded, and we've done this with some of the large customers here in the geography, it's like, hey, tell my buddy about it, and can you help him, right? So it begins to kind of build the legs of itself. We do provide capacity planning. I'm on a biweekly call now that we're providing inputs into data center locations and capacities. We're staying ahead of that. We stay with the Microsoft semester planning, and that process is developed. It's ironclad, and we work within those boundaries, if you will, to prevent any surprises. And that's always very good. Road mapping discussions, like you saw some previews to, feature additions. This is the marathon portion of the relationship. We entered into a multi-year agreement. It's just been extended about 3x times by Microsoft to NetApp to continue to grow this relationship and the features, which I think is just completely demonstrating that, this is definitely the right place, the right time with Azure NetApp Files. So this is growing insurmountably. The engagement we would ask is, if you have questions around ANF, please contact myself or Wynn, and we will gladly get immediately engaged. The emphasis is getting immediately engaged with the customer to help them onboard and start with the experience. That provides them the almost instantaneous, hey, we're onboarded, and now we're going to start looking at these applications. One of the things that we've found that Wynn and I kind of created over time has been a workshop. And we do it with a very select group of customers. They're in that larger profile that allows and affords them the opportunity to get a perspective on the migrations into Azure NetApp Files, and it's proven itself time and time again to be very, very beneficial. So something we're not doing just rampantly right now, but it certainly has provided some road mapping ideas for them as they're migrating large workloads into Azure NetApp Files. It's easy to say the term lift and shift, but it's a little more complicated when I use the word dependencies, application dependencies. That brings in a broader scope of conversations. So engage us on that front as well. So that's where I'll stop. I'll see if there's any questions. If not,
any questions?
Hi, my name is TR. I'm a CSA on the FSI side. My customer is actually, I just had a conversation, very early stage conversation with him about using NetApp for very large files they use for catastrophe risk analytics. Who would be the right person on your side to contact so that we can set up some time with the customer? I missed the initial slide, I guess, the contact details.
let me bring that back to you.
Yeah, that would be me. I can help you with that. This is Wynn speaking. Chris is storage solutions architect. I can help you with that, and then I can also help for the HPC workloads, especially. There's an HPC team within Microsoft that specializes in these large workloads as well, which can get pretty finicky sometimes. So yeah, just send me an email, and I'll be happy to engage with you and help you out.
Thank you, Chris. I'll contact you.
You bet.
Any other questions?
It's fantastic.
And folks, I will upload the slides, and you will have that contact information. If you have any questions, please reach out to Chris and Ben directly. They have their email addresses in the slide deck. So if anybody does have any questions, I hope to see everyone next week. Have a great weekend, and happy Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.